So today it's our 14th Salon, and I'm very glad we managed to do one in 2020. I thought, we would pick on the subject of resilience and education. How can education help resilience in this context, in this world? And really looking at how it impacts the children, but also the parents, the adults, and the whole community, basically. So as a design company, we are applying design thinking and education on a day-to-day basis, in a way, with our client, with our team, with ourselves. So it's kind of resonate very well with what we do at Marc and Chantal, and also the work we've been doing lately and taking on younger and younger people into our company and try to just expose them to more things. And we have a very exciting panel. One of the panelists is RENEE, the founder of Bloom Academy, and we worked with them this year on creating the branding and helping them in developing this new school that is project-based, bilingual, and very unique for Hong Kong, basically. And then we have ODETTE, who's teaching parents to be better parents, basically, and that's an amazing concept. And then we have YVETTE Kong, who's an Olympic swimmer for Hong Kong, a graduate from Berkeley University, and she's advocating mental health to the youth in Hong Kong, and she will be exemplifying, the best of what resilience can be. So, very exciting panel. Yes. I will start with the first question to ODETTE. Maybe you please introduce yourself and Gordon Parenting and what is PET, which I just learned about, even though it's been around for a long time. So.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for being here and joining us. Well, I'm ODETTE UMALI. I am the founder of Gordon Parenting. We started running or having Gordon Parenting in Hong Kong, Macau, and Philippines in Asia 5 years ago. But it's been around since the 1960s. It's available in 55 countries. This training course is basically designed for parents, educators, psychologists, counselors, social workers, those individuals who are taking care of our children, in order for them to teach life skills to our children, and also to be learning life skills and to be good adults in the future. It is designed by Dr. Thomas Gordon. He was Nobel Peace Prize nominee 3 times, multi-awarded clinical psychologist, and he designed it initially in the 1960s in California because in his practice of counseling, he had parents who had problems with their children. And he realized that parents are blamed when kids are misbehaving. He realized that there's no support for parents. So he created this prevention training program in the 1960s. Now it's called Parent Effectiveness Training Course.
And you established in Hong Kong
5 years ago.
School 5 years ago, yeah. I was shocked to hear that. I never heard about it. My parents never heard about it, and my kids, I never talked to them about this. I would still turn out okay, but I think it would have been a nice bit of information. I will talk more later about it. Next, you can, I think, elaborate a little bit on the what shapes this education and what is it built on.
All right. So when we start our session, we have 8 sessions all together for parent course. First day, first session, we ask our parents, what are the attributes that you like to have with your kids by the time they become adults? They would say, I like my kids to be independent, happy, successful, self-reliant. If you think about it, these traits are all because they want to be resilient children. Now, at the same time, learning that this is the topic that is relevant to our evening event tonight, I thought it would be handy to share with you Dr. Ginsberg's 7 C's model of resiliency. Dr. Ginsberg is a pediatrician, professor in the University of Pennsylvania, and he created this 7 C's. So why are those 7 C's so related to PET? It's because when we share about the behavior window, which is the framework developed by Dr. Thomas Gordon, it is so important that we also share the skills for parents so they become resilient in also facing the conflicts and challenges when they face in their relationship with their family members. Right. So this is the framework that we follow when we share the skills in PET. Right. This is what we call the behavior window. It is divided into 4 areas. On the top box, we call the child owns the problem. It is when the child says, I hate you, you don't make me, I don't have friends, I miss Tyler. Those are cues and clues when your child is upset. In the no problem area, you're having an enjoyable moment together, hiking as a family, or having such a great conversation over dinner. Parent owns the problem. When you come home from work, you see your kids' bags and school supplies scattered on the sofa, on the table, because they're doing your homework. They're fine, but you're upset. All you want to have is peace and harmony when you get home, because it's been a long day at work. Both own the problem, as I mentioned, is when you are having a difficulty deciding this weekend whether to visit grandma or just spend time with friends. So see, without PET, if the child owns the problem, most of the time parents is angry or sad or disappointed. When the parent owns the problem, you see those school supplies and bags on the sofa, what do? Get mad, we get angry, go back to your room and punish. Both own the problem, you're also angry and disappointed. But in PET, we have those effective skills to share with our parents. Child owns the problem, we listen, we attend. You're sad because you don't have friends. You don't like it when nobody wants to play with you. You're attending. You're allowing them to vent out those emotions, which emotions that later on are necessary in order to be resilient. In the no problem area, we need to cultivate and widen that part. That's the aim of the course, to have more enjoyable moments together. That's why we need to just send our positive messages. I really appreciate it when you set the table. It makes my dinner presentation or dinner preparation less tiring so that I can focus on cooking. Encourage, encourage, encourage. And that's also a basis of resilience, because they feel good about their contribution to you, because they matter. Parents own the problem. What we do is, I really feel really upset when I see bags lying on the floor, because I just want to have my peace this evening, and it takes time and energy for me to clear it. So if you say this to your child, then they know your need.
Okay.
Right, so we confront them. And the last one is the conflict resolution skill. When they both own the problem, how can we resolve this where you can also enjoy meeting your friends, but at the same time, say hello to grandma? How can we find that sweet spot to find our solution when your needs and my needs are also met? So those are just the ways to not just react, but be mindful and being conscious parents.
Right. It really relates to other things we'll talk later about that. It's just interesting how it applies to work situation, to I'm sure competition situation also, and training and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I got carried away. It takes
no,
24
but
hours to discuss this, but in a nutshell, I shared with you the whole framework.
I mean, there's a lot of parents here, I think. So I wish I had that slide earlier, but anyway. So thank you, Odette. Yvette, shortly, I think, to introduce yourself, I think maybe you can just talk about your journey in the world, because you went to many different places, but for education or through education, just as a way to introduce yourself, and then we'll talk later in the second part about the training and the competition, the resilience, and mental health. Yeah.
Surprise! Well, it might not be a surprise to you, but a few hours ago it was to me. anyway, like really humbling to be, you know, in the panel with two greats that has done so much in education already, and being on this panel specifically on education. So thank you, Marc, and I'm really glad to be here. So I'm YVETTE. I grew up in Hong Kong, went to local schools, and then I went to UC Berkeley when I was 18. And after UC Berkeley, as I graduated in 2015, I spent a year in Edinburgh swimming. And that's also where I made my Olympic dream came true. So I qualified in Eindhoven while I was training with the University of Edinburgh team. But yeah, it's for me, like, resilience has been a huge aha in my life. I think learning how to tap into it kind of transformed me. It was my point of metamorphosis. But I'll pause here and to see if Marc has anything to add in.
No, I think we'll get back to it later. It's just a short introduction, and we'll dig later into it. So thank you. I'm gonna switch now to RENEE, and as I say, RENEE, we spent quite a bit of time with you and your team from last year on. Actually, we started last year. And we work with you on the Bloom Academy, which is a new project for RENEE and a team. And I mean, you can explain better than me. But the website was just launched, and it looks fantastic.
Yes, very exciting.
Yeah, very
and
glad
thanks to Marc and his team, many of whom, Donna and Iris, are here, and Melody, who've helped us so much, and Agatha. And I think just now you mentioned sustainability and resilience by design. And in many ways, even though this is a design firm, I feel it's also like an education company, because we were educated as your clients about many things to do with branding, but also just thinking about how to communicate and how to define who we are as a school as well. So really appreciate that education. And so Bloom Academy, Baker & Bloom is a K-12 after-school education center. And 3 years ago, we started thinking about founding a school, a new type of school. And a lot of it has to do with what we've been discussing, because as educators, we kind of have a front row seat to changes, to attitudes that kids have and how they learn, what their habits and behaviors are. And I guess we all would agree that we live in an age that's very much characterized by change, whether it's political change, cultural change, or climate change. And so I think a lot about what Yuval Harari, maybe you guys have heard of him, he's a very famous thinker who wrote *Sapiens*. He talks a lot about how this quality of being resilient is perhaps, psychological resilience is perhaps one of the most important things that we can teach the next generation to allow them to flourish. Because I think in the past, maybe schools were about like their standards, their benchmarks, this is what an A means, and if you're a good student, you achieve it. But these days, I think the standards keep changing, and we need to start thinking about defining our own goals and our own purpose. So we're building a school that's about that. That's about helping kids find their own passion, their own purpose, and using a different way to encourage them to do that through project-based learning. And so these are the 3 pillars, actually. Sorry, if you don't mind going back just to that slide. Because in the past 3 years, we've visited and researched over 30 innovative schools around the world, and looking at Scandinavian schools, European schools, Japanese schools, schools in China, and of course many schools in the US, where I was educated, and some of our team members as well. And part of it is looking at what's happening in on the West Coast with a lot of the entrepreneurial scene, and how people who start up these companies, how they were educated and how they educate their children. And what the conclusions we drew are these 3 main areas that we have to rethink what we should teach in academics and how to teach that, focusing maybe more on application, or as much on application as on theory and interdisciplinary thinking. And then social emotional learning, which we deliver through what we call positive education. And we learn a lot from the Institute of Positive Education based in Geelong Grammar School in Australia. And the third pillar is innovation, collaborative innovation. So not just what you hear a lot about, which is STEM education, and of course we recognize digital skills are very important, but we also think that innovation needs to be social and needs to be about making a difference and about the people around us and working together. So we're trying to deliver what we call, or what David Perkins, this educator, calls a future-wise education. Yeah.
And next slide, I'm going to just show a little bit of show off the work we've done together. That's the brand we created for Bloom Academy, and it's just been quite wonderful to apply for the first time. I think it's maybe our first time we work for education. I mean, we work with cultural institutions. I mean, of course, we created the Daikun brand, and we're still working on that project. It's been 8 years we're working on the Daikun thing, and we keep adding layer to it. We know for our hospitality project, but to be able to apply our experience to that situation was and learn so much from it and from the wonderful team that I'll talk about later. And that's, you know, to see the result now, and it's just been very, very fulfilling. So thank you for that. And I'll go into maybe you can expand a little bit on the core of the learning.
Sure. So this is actually the approach that we've taken in Baker & Bloom that I came up with 6 years ago when we first started. Our first course was actually on social entrepreneurship and design thinking. But these are elements that we incorporate into all our classes, and they cover what I think are key to doing well in this day and age. So the first leaf is language, arts, and communication. And language includes coding language as well as English. And we also have Chinese, and we also have Latin. Mr. Katsia, one of the founding teachers, is here. He's a classicist, speaks 12 languages. So language is very important to us. And we think of it as the vehicle of thinking and of self-expression and connecting to others. And then learning to learn. In the context of resilience, super important. We teach the growth mindset, and the ability to keep learning on your own keeps you resilient, right? Because when you face obstacles, you have to figure your own way out, and you can't always rely on others to teach you, give you a curriculum on how to solve your problems. And although sometimes you're lucky and there are curriculum that can help you do that, but you got to find those resources, which is part of learning how to learn. And then very important, third leaf, creativity. And this is actually our mission at Baker & Bloom, to cultivate creative literacy and creative confidence. And actually creativity has been always important, but I think just in this time, it's important, has emerged, partly because we have to adapt and to create value and not just rely on what's handed to us. But also for us, it's about like, it's not always like painting or doing the creative arts, although of course those are creative acts, but also thinking creatively, learning how to ask questions. We talk about how in our school, in mainstream schools, you try to get the right answer, right? There's a question and you find the right answer. But for us, it's trying to answer unanswerable questions or ask unanswerable questions. And then finally, leadership and service, which is what we think what education aspires towards, making a difference, learning how to be the best version of yourself, which is a form of leadership, and having a positive impact on your community. So even when we teach literature, this is what the framework that guides us.
So maybe you can talk about resilience and this concept of grit. I think also, I think it relates also to YVETTE and the hard training and things like that, which we can talk later. But I think it's and feedback also.
Actually, if you don't mind skipping to that slide with the Angela Duckworth quote, it's sort of, sorry to jump ahead, but I think it'll help. Yep, there, right.
This one.
Yep. So maybe many of you have heard of Angela Duckworth. So she's a psychologist, and I really love this definition that I hope might add to our conversation here. And she's a TED Talk on that. Grit is the tendency to sustain interest in and effort toward very long-term goals. And the concept of resilience is folded into that. But I think what this adds, what the concept of grit adds, is the importance of goals. Because resilience might be like when life beats you down, you're able to bounce back, right? As you said, respond to change. But without a goal, it's sort of like, it's kind of depressing, even if you're very resilient. Like you had a goal, right? And you talked about achieving your life goal, an amazing one. And I'm sure it took a lot to achieve it, but partly it was also your interest in it. And I think when we connect that with education or parenting, it's about like giving our children that space to find their purpose, because most of school is actually prescribed. You know, you're told what to do, concept of homework, of testing. And so within that framework, how do you create freedom to help kids explore and to build skills towards their purpose? And I guess key points that she makes to continue even when we struggle and temporarily fail, the growth mindset, and also how these are characteristics that a person can develop. And I think that's really important. If you think about why people are not resilient, that might be because they believe that if you failed, that's the end of the story, or they expect success to be point A to point B, a linear path. But if you think that actually the road towards your goal is going to be meandering, that you discover it as you walk, then when you hit an obstacle, it doesn't feel so bad, right? Because it's about expectations too. But I think most of the time in a traditional school, you kind of expect the goal's been defined, and if you're good at it, you're going to reach it. And if you're not, maybe you're not talented, and that's not something you can control. So it's very depressing. And I think the beauty of the concept of growth mindset, Dr. Carol Dweck's concept of growth mindset, is that it makes you think of talent, or maybe not talent, but intelligence as dynamic. And so that's much more positive a concept, and you feel you can do something about it. And that motivates you to bounce back.
I'll go back to the...
Sure. Yeah. I can cover these as we talk about project-based learning.
Project-based, I think we can quickly talk about this picture was taken for the new side, but and that's where there's a connection, I think. So the first time I met RENEE and the team, and Chris was here, and we sit down and we start talking, and they wanted a branding concept and we start talking, and then we realized in a way that the way we're working here at Marc and Chantal, the way we operate as a creative company, is everything they were telling us is like, but that's what we do every day, basically, And as you say, I see our company also as not just a company, but also a place for some kind of education, and where we can try things and people can grow in this context. And it is obviously by nature project-based for us, but the way you apply it for primary and secondary kids, I think is pretty. I mean, we feel very connected right away when we start talking. Yeah.
Completely. I mean, in many ways, we're trying to cultivate people who think and work like you guys. And I mean, the title of today is The Future of Education. Right. And I think a lot of the future, what education is looking at is the workplace and taking things that people are already doing and putting it back in schools, because schools have been rather slow to evolve if you compare it to like a hospital. I mean, you would not want to go to a hospital that was designed 30 years ago. But schools look pretty much the same as they did 30 years ago. Although I have to say this year, 2020, school no longer looks the same.
That's another topic.
Yes.
Yeah.
But project-based learning, yeah. So, I mean, what is a project? It's a task that you define. There's a goal, and you continue to work on it over a sustained period. Often it is based on a problem, a challenge, a quest. And in our secondary school, Chris can explain more, but we have a guild system where they're interdisciplinary projects,
we'll talk about it later.
and they're missions, right? So you can see many of the elements there. There's a driving question, sustained inquiry and innovation, collaborative work. So there's student voice and choice, right? So we're talking about that space to build resilience. And then feedback and revision, so important. So you build the prototype, which itself is great because it lowers the stakes, right? You label something, this is your prototype, this is your draft, this is the pilot phase. And it doesn't sound like this is your final exam and like your final grade. But in the process of building prototype and iterating, you're receiving feedback. And to learn to take negative feedback builds resilience. I'm sure your coaches give you a lot of feedback. That's not easy to take, right? So I think it's nice to have a school where teachers are your partners and your guides and your coach more than just like your instructor or like kind of more like a lecturer. Yeah.
And by the way, I remember we did I think in the beginning of a project, as we always do, we work on strategy. We define, what is a brand DNA, positioning, all these things. And we organized with Chris and I think Rebecca was there, a workshop here. We got the 10 kids.
Yes, we brought the teenagers in the
Yeah. And they were here in that room, and we did a real life exercise about the
it was so great for them.
Yeah, and it was it was very interesting. Very interesting. They were young and so articulated. I have to say, I'm sure they were well picked, but I'm sure all you kids are pretty.
That was all of them.
That was all of them. So as the it was an amazing exchange where they came here to do kind of exercise that we do on a daily basis, but I think they were just so good at it. It's like, so very interesting.
So he's talking about students that are in our secondary pilot program. So we're running a pilot program for the school to implement all these ideas. So we have a project term in winter, 3 weeks dedicated to that. And for primary, we also have a pilot program. Secondary program, this is our 3rd year. Pilot, this is our 2nd year. And we're launching the primary school next year.
Right, yeah. Okay, I think we covered. There's so much to talk about, I think, when it comes to this subject. So that's why I tried to focus today on primary, secondary, and the idea of resilience. We can talk a bit about education forever, but we try to. We'll do another talk, but now I think we can already switch into the panel discussion. So I'm going to address some question to. You already answered that. So to the panel, and we can just discuss basically and see how it relates from one to another, and your personal experience into each question, basically. So RENEE, you already answered that. So we just move into that. But this is I think where Chris can maybe help us a little bit. Chris is a secondary master. I don't know. And we had amazing interaction with Chris working at Bloom Academy and his 12 pilot students. And can you explain maybe, or RENEE, do you want to? I think Chris, I'll give you a mic. Come here. Because, yes. Because what I thought was when Chris explained to us, for me was a ha moment. Also, it's like that the media study, and you will explain what it means, was at the core of the education and resilience. I think it's so what happened today with the fake news and the conspiracy theory. I mean, that you think of that at such an early age. I think it's so vital, basically. So I'll let you talk.
This is a bit of a misleading picture because when we try to explain the map that we have created for learning, most parents who grew up in a system that is very subject-based in secondary can't really interpret it. So what I've done is put the subjects where they fit on our map so that parents have a starting point to understand what we're doing. But essentially, you have 4 continua. 2 of the continua focus on sciences, and 2 of the continua focus on the humanities. And they range from the purely theoretical to the purely practical. And all subjects can be plotted along those continua or various intersections of those continua that allows you to really understand where a subject, as we understand it, exists on the map of all knowledge. Because when we do high school, we basically have to meet 2 tensions. What do they need to know and what should they know? Those are not the same thing. And so you have to figure out what do they need to study, And should you be focusing on a more theoretical version of that body of knowledge, or can you go more practical? And so what we've designed is a way to plot the various subjects, which will over time dissolve to no longer be subjects, but be focus areas for literacy development. And that is essentially how we've mapped it out, so that we know exactly which literacies are being developed through which subjects. And for the first time, you can design interdisciplinary offerings from the ground up. Because what usually happens in secondary is that you've got teachers that are forced to collaborate, usually, to create interdisciplinary units where you've got a mathematician and a historian suddenly having to sit and look at one another and say, okay, tell me about your subject, I'll tell you about yours. And they create this thing, but the timetable usually means that you can't really schedule for it properly. It doesn't get done properly in terms of its development across the years. And so it's not truly interdisciplinary. It's more a band-aid for interdisciplinary learning. But the trend of education, and you see this in universities already, is that people who come in with purely disciplinary knowledge, the expert is dead, essentially. And the only thing that remains is for people with multiple expertise that can negotiate the meanings between them, because machines are much better at pure expertise than we are. And so if you are a pure expert, you are basically competing with AI. And that doesn't make any sense. So that's the summary. I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, Chris. Every time Chris talk to me, yeah, I think you mentioned obvious things that are so important to us. Also, is the interdisciplinary. I just talk a little bit about that because I cannot forget. But the foundation of our work, Marc and Chantal, and the way we looked at it when we established the company in 91, and it really relates also to our education, our design education in Paris. When I did 5 years of study. That is not just art or design, but also media in a sense and communication. And we always wanted our company not to just be a design company or doing logos or doing advertising, but really have a holistic approach to what we're doing, to the work. But I think that now that it can translate into education at such an early age, what Chris was just talking about with we call it cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary. There's so many ways to talk about it. But the fact that it's design as a process of education, I think it's and designed by RENEE and the team, I think and brought to Hong Kong in a bilingual environment, I think it's quite extraordinary. That's why we relate. Tell me. Yeah.
You mentioned you wanted us to talk about media literacy,
Mm-hmm.
and I think Chris covered all the blue area. And at the center of it, you see media studies. And it's because, as Chris has designed it, media literacy is what every subject is filtered through, right? And so everything comes to you through either a screen or a lecture or a performance. And so what we try to teach students is also to question like the medium itself as it's being delivered to you. So you're learning history. There's a history textbook. Who wrote it? When was it written? Or maybe it's a website, right? So looking at sources and evidence. What constitutes evidence in history is different from what constitutes evidence in science and in literature, and they're all relevant. And so it's kind of like a meta skill to understand all the subjects. And for us, media literacy is not just about analyzing, but also about creating. So what Chris is talking about.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, but it's. I mean, in 2020, come on. What you
Like,
saying?
for example,
questioning news, questioning facts.
Post-truth. I mean, 3 years ago in 2017, right after the election, we had a course called like How Not to Be Fooled by Fake News. Like that very summer, because it was very obvious. That year, the word of the year was post-truth. And I mean, she's not here, but our STEM program director is a former NASA engineer. So we have someone with that type of expertise designing this. And when she teaches anything, whether it's elections and looking at polling, or COVID and looking at sort of the reporting of COVID and how it is measured in different countries, doing that type of analysis is
doing that with
important.
Primary school children, by the way.
With
so
primary,
that's the
primary 1 to 3 students. So it's
Yeah.
that's the fun part of learning together.
Great. I don't even know what the next slide is, but doesn't matter. We'll just go for it. This event. So, yeah, throwing that to you. Yeah, take that.
What's that? Catching water, sticky hands, parental principle.
Please explain. Yeah, I'll let you explain, because I know it means different things to you, but also it relates in so many ways to what we're talking about. Okay.
So, super interesting. I think, so a little bit of background context. So I'm a swimmer, and I also practice Wing Chun. Not sure if anyone seen Wing Chun. Oh, well, it's in Ip Man movies, so I hope you've seen it. And also
martial art, right? It's a martial art.
Martial art.
From Hong Kong. Developed in Hong Kong? No.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would say yes.
Yes. Okay. And used by Bruce Lee as well?
Yes.
Yes.
And then, I've also been a managing consultant at McKinsey, where they emphasize a lot on parental principle, like the 80-20 rule. So using 20% of input to maximize and get 80% of the outcome.
Yeah.
But I think the wider context for me is I've been and I'll share my kind of limited life experiences to you all, but to me, I have this connection with water, and I feel like I'm still learning. So, when I was younger, I started swimming at 3. When I was 3, and I realized that I wanted to be an Olympic swimmer when I was 7. I remember watching the Sydney Olympics on TV, and I was glued and hypnotized by all the amazing swimming stroke and underwater footage of swimmers. And at that point, I made a goal. I told my friends, one day I really love to be an Olympic swimmer. And then I started training, and at first it was maybe 5 days a week. 3 days a week, 5 days a week, and then when I got to 13, 14, it would be double sessions a day, 8 to 9 times a week. But it was all progressing well. It was quite a linear progress for me. So I was I broke the Hong Kong record when I was 13, which was a relatively young age, and then I was thinking that maybe I can try out for the Beijing Olympic in 2008. When I was 15, so I went for it and I did not make it. So I was about a second behind the qualification time, which in swimming it's not too far but far, and 1 second margin is it's not that big for a 200-meter course. But anyway, I was I was young, and it's okay. I could turn frustration into motivation. So the next year, I went into full motivation, and I was trained. I went to Australia for a few months, and then I really hoped to perform well in the Hong Kong East Asian Games. That's the first time ever that Hong Kong had host any huge games. And then so I actually did well. I had my career high then, and I was super excited. You were 16. I was 16, yeah. And I was world ranking 21st when I was 16, and then I also broke all the Hong Kong breaststroke records. But what I didn't realize was, I was naive, and I've been very fortunate that I put in hard work and I saw results. It's all a linear progress. But what I didn't realize was that it was followed by 6 years where I trained, and I did not perform. So I went backwards. So how many of you here has read Malcolm Gladwell's, Outlier? And it says to get to the point of mastery, you need to attain 10,000 hours of work. Mm-hmm. So I went to college. I went to UC Berkeley, and I was super excited because I was training with, Olympic gold medalists, people I saw on TV, and I was quite a fangirl. But I trained. I did the same thing, put in the hard work, but it's weird because I went backwards. It's not that I didn't improve, I actually went backwards. And I was really frustrated. So, after a year there, I also tried out for the 2012 London Olympics. And my best stroke is a 100-meter breaststroke. So this time, I went and I missed it by 0.1 second. Yeah. And actually, I was thinking that I would feel okay, and so next day I just went back to training and putting in the hours. I'm sure RENEE would, ODETTE would know because your son swims as well, and just because at that time I think there's still the stigma where athletes are kind of seen as superheroes, where we put a cape on and then be okay to work through like difficulties and adversities. So I just kind of went on, but the breakage point for me was that my performance kept going further backwards to a point where I wasn't even making like the NC2A. So I didn't even qualify for the NC2A, let alone the goal of going to the Olympics. So I broke down and I actually quit. So I told my coach, like, swimming was such a happy thing for me, but I don't know when and how it became a little bit of a burden. So every time when I was going to practice, I felt like there's something in there that...
So you didn't enjoy it anymore, basically?
Yeah. And I didn't fully understand why. So I was like, I'll just go back and have a normal college life, party, like, have some fried chicken wings and all that. But yeah, college, what college should be. And so I went, I quit for a few months and I went back. No, I started having some flashbacks but it kind of went from it hurt to swim, and then it became like it hurt not to swim. So something was wrong.
Right.
Yeah. So and then that was the point where I talked to my coach and my teammates, and they were like, okay, maybe you should like see someone professional. But in the culture that I grew up in, like in Hong Kong,
and you were 18, or what?
20-ish.
20-ish. Yeah.
Yeah, and the culture I grew up in. I think there's always been some sort of a stigma where, oh, it's your willpower. Come on, like, try harder.
Multiply that in Asia with a culture that, oh, you're not supposed to ask for help or something like that. Probably, right? Yeah.
Yeah, try harder.
Try harder.
Just like, okay. So, and that's where the reflective journey started. And it's funny because when talking about resilience, at that point I had, how many years? I have about 3-4 years like that I wasn't performing. And to be honest, I never really had that dip. So it was a little bit of a crush for me. But one of the things that, my teammates said to me that really stuck to me was that they were like, oh, that like, everyone fails. Like, it's okay. No one is invisible. But what you should do, or how you should look at it, is that you need to fail successfully. And that, at first I was like, what the heck is that?
What
like,
do you mean?
How do you fail successfully? And then they were like, oh, you need to change this perspective, see it a blessing in disguise, and make failure a springboard for success. Try to learn what went wrong and try to fix it, adapt it.
So it's all the thing we're talking about is like taking a risk, having feedback that is, that feels safe and positive rather than demeaning, and then you had the ultimate success where you went to Ingeborg, and that's where you qualify after that.
Yeah, and you know, I slowly went back to swimming. I think there were a couple things that helped me got back into it. You know, first is remember why I started. Because I also read, you know, Angela Duckworth's book, and I think there's a formula in there where it's like grit plus passion equals to resilience. Yeah. Yeah. And then for me, it was like, okay, why did I start swimming? Yeah, I lost that along the way. So I had to channel back to a little girl who just loved being in the water, and realize that it's still my passion. It's still something that I would love to spend time doing. And you know, started to feel the water back.
Catching water again.
Yeah, yeah. You know,
Can you explain catching water, what it means technically?
Oh,
because it's really cool.
It's so in swimming, so we always talk about stroke efficiency, and catching water is it's obviously metaphorical. Like you can't catch water, but what it means is like you feel yourself propelling forward with the stroke, and it's oftentimes a sensation for swimmers. So we're like hypersensitive, and every time we swim, it's the same but it's different. So, you know, every stroke, every time, like your body position can be on like slightly different level.
You will
like,
feel it.
Yeah, and we feel it.
Yeah.
And then we have to adapt to every sensation or situations that we're in. It's like doing yoga.
Yeah.
A little bit. Like every time it's the same, but it's different.
But what you describe is like, if you put too much power into it, which you know maybe it's counterintuitive, like maybe it's going to slow you down, which kind of a metaphor.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what we've been
exactly
doing before, right?
So like I think water is a very funny thing where, like, I don't know how many of you like swimming, but it's a very funny thing because you can't catch it. Like if you listen to Bruce Lee, like, you know, be like water, but it's really shapeless, and you kind of have to just adapt to it. And for me, it's the constant sensing of your surrounding and adapting to it. And when because I also practice Wing Chun, and when I do the Qi Sao, it's also the same where you have to feel the person opposite to you, like what kind of like subtle movement they're trying to do, and you make an adjustment. But if you exert, like swimming, right? If you exert too much power,
right,
you don't quote unquote catch any water because you can't feel it. So it's always like a balance between like force and sensation. It's always that balance.
Well, it's a great metaphor for what we're talking about today.
But in life, like I know it humbles me to try to apply in life, because sometimes when you see an opportunity, you have to seize it. But then if you're too forceful or too eager in something, you miss it, or you screw it up.
That's why, I mean, the connections are amazing to me, and even what Odette was talking about, you know, the fact to parent, to the parenting of parents, and just those concepts of you know, being balanced in a sense, and knowing where to exert, you know, pressure, force, and sometimes just you know, time to chill. And our recovery time is important also, and not just, I mean, for athletes, for you, recovery time is, you know, when you don't train 10 hours a day because it's senseless, but, you know, you train 6 hours a day and then you recover. But for kids, you know, especially in Hong Kong and everywhere, just scheduling so much activity for one kid into his education also, it's back to it just produce inefficiency, not just inefficiency, but it just hurt people, and then I don't think they will have the space to flourish basically.
It's the same with relationship as a parent. You know, it's critical to be present when children are, you know, need some attention, but it's also critical to be absent. Finding the balance.
Wow,
you know,
this is tall order.
Yeah, this is against helicopter parenting, and it's
amazing.
also against permissive parenting. So it depends on the individual child. You know, there are children who
so it's like water, you need to adapt.
Yeah,
you need to feel it. yeah, it doesn't make it easy to talk about that. You just see how complex it is, but it's good to know there's different ways. And having people with experience and who experience it, talking about it. I mean, we experience it in our own way here, but I mean, to hear you talking about the same concept and suddenly saying, wow, this is related, it's quite, from very different point of view, it's very enriching.
I guess one connection I can think of to school design is sort of our incorporation of projects, but also internships, because then you get real life experience. And then you see, I mean, Angela Duckworth talks about doing grit interviews, where you talk to other people.
What is that? Yeah.
This is a grit interview. We just experienced one. It's where you listen to other people and see what their story is, their journey is, and that puts your own life into context. And I think giving kids that opportunity to think about other people, you know, first step in design thinking, empathy, puts their own problems into context. So, I mean, thank you for that sharing. I think that was
it's fantastic. Thanks, Yvette. Talking about internship, I'm going to pass the mic to, and I want to acknowledge, so this salon has been very much organized and curated by one of a brilliant intern that is now working with us, Melody Carbichan, who's actually organized this whole thing. So, and I think she, yes, and she also exemplified that idea of, you know, she's been interning with us for a few months, and then she's working at, she's studying at Hong Kong U, and now she's working maybe 2 days a week with us. So, and she organized that. And she has a question for one of our guests, so I'll let you.
I have a question for a surprise guest. Surprise guest. So we're talking about Bloom. Yeah. So we're talking about Bloom's education, and that's primary and secondary. And I guess from my background as well, parents' background, we look at early years a lot. And with Bloom, as well as with Woodlands, what I want to know is how you foster resilience from very early years at Woodlands.
Thank you, Melody. First, I just want to say that I thoroughly enjoyed listening to you and making the connections that all three of you have shared as well. So at Woodland Preschools, we talk about resilience, and also it's around self-regulation as well. So we know in our young children, and you'll know as well, sometimes they get a little bit upset and a little bit emotional, and it's how teaching the skills of how the child can actually deal with that. And for us, that's really important. So one of the things we've brought in is well-being. And for us, well-being is extremely, extremely important. And we've brought in something called the Wellbeing Charter. And that's talking about nutrition, talking about sleep, talking about the physical. And it's also about talking about connecting, talking about giving, and talking about doing. So one of the things that we're doing currently is something we call Casual for a Cause, and that's when our teachers, on a Friday, we can wear jeans, we can be casual, and we put money aside. And then we're talking with the children why we're doing it, and so this is the part of the giving and the doing as well, is what charity would you like to give this money to? And then they start thinking about, well, what charities are out there, what's important to their... So it's that sense of agency as well, voice and choice and agency towards the children. The other part we do as well is that we bring in daily meditation and yoga, including baby yoga as well, because it's now that we actually need to start teaching it to our children, because when they get to your age or our age, is that sometimes a little bit too late. So I look at and listen to your story, and I find it an extremely inspiring story, and the way that you went through this huge challenge that could have, well, it did affect your life, and you've built up this resilience. Now, you've learnt that somewhere, because it's, and most people it's not natural. So it's our job as early educators to help support that and to actually teach those skills as well. And I know that we've worked in the past with ODETTE as well, for Gordon Parenting, and parents play an important part in setting up those rituals and routines, because rituals are really important for our children. And it, so it's all that resilience and self-regulation that we want to teach our children through well-being and mental well-being.
Thank you, Melody. Yeah, I mean, talking about I think we will take questions if there's more, and we will wrap it up soon because it's been a long day and a great talk. But I think what you talk about in terms of the energy is nutrition and regulating yourself. I mean, it's all those information are here, and this knowledge is all around us. But I think as we move forward as a society and the world, I think to be able to be maybe more aware of that, it should be transmitted at an earlier age, and why not? You know, I think do not leave it so much to chance and to. I mean, we can all we learn things through life, and it's great. But I think if we can share more of us knowledge, that can really help. And even yoga. I mean, we started in every Wednesday in this room here. We started yoga this year, and we have a yoga teacher coming every Wednesday for the company, Marc and Chantal. And I think it's been. It was my first time. I started yoga just because of that. You know, I don't know, in March or April this year, and it's just amazing the impact, the 2080 thing. You know, you put a little bit of effort into it, but then the results are pretty amazing actually. So it's another way to build resilience is really to look at the level, try to understand the level of your energy and how you can use it basically. Any question from the audience, I think, or anything you want to add to the conversation? I think we covered a lot, but be happy to continue.
I just want to sort of answer your question too, for young children. I have 2 young boys, like one's 2, one's 4. Actually, one turned 3 this week. And I think play is actually a great way to build resilience. But of course, all kids play. So it's also about observing them and like stepping in the right moments and, you know, teaching them as they play. And then the other thing I feel, we live in such a privileged environment sometimes in Hong Kong. Not all of us, of course, but I do think that many of us do. And I think part of it is selective deprivation. Because, you know, it's sort of like by design, what you're saying, because it's going to come. You know, at some point in their lives, they're going to have some major setback, right? And it's whether you tell them a story that's like, you know, you work hard and you'll succeed, and that's the story they believe in, which is a fairy tale, and that's not always true, right? Or whether you just tell them that sometimes
it's not linear.
That it's not linear, and also help them experience that. And so if they're not very deprived, I think many of our children are not very deprived, then you have to deprive them. It sounds terrible, and this is not the like Asian mom in me, but I actually think this is.
There's some, I don't know, Dora, I think do you agree with that? Yeah. No, I mean,
a little controversial and not related to our school. So this does not represent Bloom philosophy, but just a personal.
Starve them a little bit.
I mean, yeah. I mean, made me think a lot about my own journey, and just to very quickly share, I think that I learned the most from having eczema, asthma, and then in college I hurt my neck, so I couldn't write for 2 years, and I didn't know if I'd ever recover. And then I recovered. I taught. I went to get a degree, and first week I got hit by a car, and it took me a year and a half to walk properly again. And I probably learned more from that than going to any school.
It nicely goes back to my first slide about my Chantal Petit, my art teacher in my design school, telling me that, you know, a good day is a day wasted, which seems harsh. But I think, you know, with time you understand the love behind it and the attention that she meant, and that is true every day.
And I'd like to go back to that. It's really like saying obstacles are not that bad.
Yeah, enjoy the failure.
These are teachable moments that you have with your child, and so when you navigate solutions together, you may not know the answer, but they see how you do it step by step. It's how you do it with Project Base. So this is modeling, and part of that is a partnership between, partnership of education as parents, because it is really the center of their life. We have to be there and not just expect the school to provide this very important trait of developing resilience. After all, when they grow up, they will have to think about other obstacles in their lives, right? It's not about forgetting the mathematical formula or not writing the right Mandarin character or that chemistry formula, right? But it's about their decisions in life, their relationship, their friendship. And they're at risk in failing in that phase too. But we need to do our part as parents and educators to work together in creating this beautiful, resilient trait and develop it in our children.
I really agree with it. I think resilience, well, personally, I think it's a #1 skill. So if I were to retire like tomorrow and someone asked me like, okay, if there's one takeaway from your 20 years of swimming career, what would it be? I think for me, it's just the knowledge that like, okay, I overcame something that I thought I couldn't. And like going for it, it's not like life will be easy and I can overcome everything, but it's knowledge that there will still be hard things, but it's okay because I can overcome it. I think that piece.
I think we all experienced that this year, probably in a way. I mean, more acutely this year, in a way or another. I mean, it was very, very clear this year that we had. I think everybody we had, and we still have moments of real doubt and like almost like feeling very close to the edge of some kind of a black hole or whatever, for whatever reason it is, professional, relation and thing. But knowing that actually somehow we still go through it, and then it just makes you stronger, knowing that, because it's a way to manage your fear. In a sense, I think maybe resilience is a way to say it's okay to be afraid and be scared. I think I think to be scared is a very vital, obviously very vital survival tool, and to learn that you can be scared and then be able to control your fear and shift it to a direction that is more purposeful. I think it's also probably part of in the process of building resilience. Right?
Yeah, well said.
Yes, Joe.
I just wanted to share a concrete example. As a parent with resilience, my boy had been playing soccer ever since he was like 3 or 4. And I think when he was 6 or 7, I can't really remember the age, it was his first game, and he was, for some reason, they put him in goalie. He'd never been a goalie before. And of course, he did so well, but at the very end, it came down to shootout, like single goals. And so we as parents were so tense. And sure enough, 1 goal went by him, and his whole team lost. And I think it was 6 or 7. There was so much pressure, you can imagine, right? Everyone's watching the shootout. And he went into this half-an-hour rage where he was so upset that he had disappointed his team members. He literally, we could not go near him. He was like 6. He was very young. And it was very interesting because as a parent, I was so heartbroken. I knew this was going to come. And I couldn't help him. But in retrospect, it was such a good lesson because that was his first time of actually feeling failure and feeling like he had let his whole team down. And he just was so emotional. But at the same time, after that experience, he became a better player, and he knew it was okay to fail. It was okay not to win. And the team all got together. The coach was great. It was like, and I remember the coach had said, sometimes the biggest wins are when you learn how to fail. And it was such a great experience for me as a parent, because you try and protect your child from heartbreak as much as you can, but sometimes you just have to let them go through it, or they won't be able to learn later. Sharon. But that's why I love this topic.
Thank you, Joe. All right. Any other question? Any other comments? Are we ready for some? I guess we have drinks. Yeah. No food, but drinks. We good? Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Great talk. Thank you.